I'm Alanna Levenson, and I am here with my co-host, Grace Del Rey,
Hello.
and welcome to the Upcut. So, most hiring mistakes don't happen in the interview. They happen before the process even starts. They happen when you, as the business owner or leader, haven't made a clear decision about what you actually need. And if you're not clear on the problem, you'll hire the person who relieves pressure, looks impressive, or just feels right, none of which guarantee that they can actually do the job. And leaders who use urgency, ambiguity, or external validation in hiring will lead to certain pitfalls that we're going to talk about here today.
And the coffee quote of the week is good coffee, like good hires, isn't about speed. It's about getting the right blend.
That's a good one.
Mm. Which brings me to how many of us have gone out and hired out of just the pure need for relief of the pressure. I've got too much work on my plate, and now all I want to do is I need a body. I need a body that can do it. And that urgency becomes the driving force behind hiring. What have you felt in that situation?
Yeah, they just want, they're feeling pain in a certain area of their business. They just want it to stop. It's sort of like a leak that they want to plug.
Yeah.
It's sort of like they want relief from some sort of pressure where they haven't actually slowed down enough to think about what's the role that makes the most sense right now.
Yeah, and even if you think about that, like for example, in my company, it's about accounting and bookkeeping, right? So I know that I wanted to hire another bookkeeper, so I knew what I wanted, but then the differences between bookkeepers and what they say they can do and what they can actually do are two completely different things. And then you're like, how do you just, like, and you're in a rush and you're just like, well, this person sounds like they're saying all the right things. And then you like go, okay, I'm going to hire this guy. And then they come in and they're a disaster. They
We think
don't
about
know how to use
that
the
now, right?
software. They don't know how to use the software. They don't know how to reconcile. They don't know what a P&L and a profit and a loss or a balance sheet looks like. And you're like, what did I just hire?
Yeah. Yeah, because ultimately you engage in that process to just make yourself feel better. Like, I can breathe for a moment.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's the worst feeling when you've made that bad hire and you're trying to make it work because you like the person and they are making mistake after mistake after mistake, and you're like, I need to let them go because they're costing me time, they're costing me client trust, they're just costing me money because how many hours do I have to spend redoing their work and not having that trust that they actually were able to do it right the first time around.
Well, and something I've seen with this not being clear on the role is the person you just hired is actually not really clear on what it is that they're supposed to be doing.
True that.
And then they might come to you with questions, and then the perception that I've heard some business owners share with me is they think that that person's incompetent.
Right. Or you're too busy to you're like so overwhelmed because you get this way, especially during tax season, you can get this way. For those that are in the accounting, financial world, it's like you're going so fast and you're like, you can't, it's like you have to stop and slow down to explain to them what they need to do so they do it right the first time around because you can't really afford for them to not do it right the first time around. And yet you don't have time to do that. So it's like,
Yeah.
and you'll end up shutting, like, I probably shut down a couple of good hires based on I didn't have time to show them. And then I just was like, they're a bad hire.
Right. That's where people go to is the immediate like, oh, I made a wrong decision, and then you want to let that person go. And the thing is they might be a bad hire or the wrong decision, but sometimes also there's clarity about the role that happens once the person gets hired, because then the business owner or their leader then fully realizes what they actually need. So I'm not going to say, it was necessarily the wrong thing to do. Maybe it was exactly what needed to happen that gave you the clarity that you needed. It's just that if you slow down enough and think about it with more intention before you even write the job description, or before you start, selecting candidates to interview, or the questions that you're going to ask them in the interview for the particular role because you've thought about the role,
Right.
and then you'll be able to know what to test them for,
Right.
or right, to see, do they have actually experience with the role that you need, the tasks and responsibilities that you need them to fulfill. How does that show up in your business? What are the nuances and the unique kinds of scenarios? Then you'll be able to ask questions in the interview process based on how it suits your company, your clientele, regardless of the skills and responsibilities,
Right.
versus approaching it in a generic way.
Right. And then, like being able to also test it out by calling their references and asking the references, those specific questions become, like, yes, you can ask questions, just yes and no questions, but you can pose the question in a yes and no way. Have they ever dealt with this particular situation? Yes or no? And they can legally say yes or no to any of those questions. But you should definitely have a list of questions to ask their references on their work, what they can and cannot do. Because I think that's where it's like we're rushing just to like save the leak, the sinking ship.
Well, on that note too, I mean, I'm not an employment attorney, nor am I a full expert in human resources, but there are, just a note, there are legalities around what kinds of questions you can ask when you
Mhm.
do reference checks. So I just want to put a note in that too, to make sure that you know what you're doing in that regard. But what we're also now drawing attention to is, which is the second pitfall. The first was hiring for relief. The second
Yeah.
one is a vague role definition. If you're not super clear on it, then how are you going to, if you're not clear, how are you going to be able to communicate that to the candidate? How will you be able to write a job description or know what you're going to ask them? And what will success look like when somebody comes into this role?
Yeah, like I've helped clients in their hiring process and they knew vaguely what they wanted in terms of their project manager, but how that project manager was going to be successful, they didn't have an onboarding process put together. So even though the person was had a history of having great project managing skills and could like move mountains, when they came to work in this particular client's business, they fell on their face and they kept trying to do it their way. And they didn't even know what the client's way was because the client wasn't clear. Because she's often the owner of the company is the one who's doing all the project managing, and she didn't have the ability to communicate very clearly each step and how she made the decision so that that person could make the same decisions in that thought process to teach them the thought process because it does become a thought process with like logistics and stuff like that to
Right.
move
So
things.
everything lived here, right? So if
Yeah.
couldn't document anything, how can she replicate herself?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do that, right? And then that impacts something that was brought up earlier, which is the onboarding process, the training process, to make sure that they can get up to speed as quickly as possible so that you can, the reason that you hired them was, not only to fix that leak, but because you were overwhelmed and doing too much and you were growing and you're scaling. So the quicker that you can hand things off to this person, the better. But if they're not even really clear on what they're supposed to be doing, how
Oh
can
my
you
God.
effectively do that? And then it becomes kind of whack-a-mole in terms of, are they there to put out fires and to take care of problems, or do you need them working on things to create things, document things, create processes, innovate things that haven't been working for a while? Like, what is it that you need them to do so that you can hand that off and they've got the confidence and the space to be able to go ahead and do that so that you can then go focus on other things?
Right. Yeah. In that particular example, that poor fellow kept coming up with ideas and they'd be like, well, that's not how we do it. But they didn't want to spend the time to say this is how we're doing it and this and this and this. And they just was like, go, go lead. And
And he did. It's right. So then he did. And then, oh, well, that's not how we do things here.
that's
It's
not
like,
how
you're
we do
right
things.
thinking, well, then how do you do things here?
right? And then the people that he had to manage in the project management were angry because they were like, how did he get the job? He knows nothing. And then they don't want to like talk to him because he's pushing them to like do work faster, but he doesn't know what it takes to do that work and what's
See,
a
and they
realistic goal. So he's
when
getting, so he's in this horrible position of like trying to move the mountain over the hill, over this other mountain, and not having the leader give them great direction, and then he doesn't have anybody that's he has all these people that he's supposed to be leading and they can't follow him because they have no trust with him because he doesn't understand what they're doing. So he's just in this horrible position of like failing in every way possible.
Yeah, he was not set up for success in that. They did not properly introduce him. They did not properly say, this is why we've hired him. This is why we think he's going to be a great asset to our organization and a great leader for this team. And they didn't give this leader direction. They probably should know how to do this anyway, but maybe they don't. When you come in as a leader, there is a way to approach a team that you're going to be leading that you possibly didn't have the chance to meet. And that's another thing that companies, I think, do. They set it up for a failure in that they don't include some of the people that are going to be reporting to this new leader they didn't include them in the interview process, and they could have.
Right. And they could have said, okay, they're going to be taking on this position. They're not taking on your job. They're taking on this position. How can you support them to understand what you do and what you need so that you can be successful and he can help you advocate for you as well as you can advocate for them. Like how to make that a role that can actually flourish everybody in the company versus making it all by just dropping the person in, you make them adversarial to the people below them and the people above them.
Intentionally.
It's
Yeah.
like one of those like, oh man.
Well, and sometimes this happens, bringing us to the third one for today. You kind of overvaluing things on their resume or a brand or logo that you saw on their resume, thinking, oh, well, gosh, they worked at so and so organization or so and so company. So they are so capable. So once you get them in the door, you're like, oh, phew, okay. All right, you go do your thing, and I'm going to go over here.
Yeah, and I did that. I have done that. I made probably the worst hire in my life. I hired this fellow because he came from a CPA firm that I worked with and he needed extra work during the off season. And I was like, yeah, I need a bookkeeper. And he was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do. And I brought him in and I didn't really check his references because he was coming over from the CPA firm. So of course he should know. He did not know how to use the software. He did not know how to reconcile in the software that he said he knew. And then he started going around the office asking for help from the other employees to help him, which I appreciate. But then he expected them to do his job for him. And I was like, what is going on? And like all of the other people in the office were like coming to me individually and being like, can you ask him not to come to my desk? And that,
This is that I appreciate you sharing that, Grace. So, the subconscious thinking was probably like, oh, he worked at so and so CPA firm, so he must be good at X, Y, and Z, right?
yeah.
So quickly tell the audience what you related to when you saw that related to the fact that he worked at XYZ CPA firm
I
and
just
thinking,
thought, oh,
yeah.
yeah, I just thought, I literally just thought this was earlier on when I was growing exponentially. And I thought, oh, well, this will be an easy hire because he's already working here. It's just that one of those things like, oh, he worked here. He must be really good. Not realizing he was a data entry person. He only did the data entry into the accounting software for the forms that they do for the different tax returns. He didn't actually work with the accounting software that we were working with or know anything about it, really.
What did you learn from that situation?
Oh, to test. I now have a stringent test that all potential employees that are going to be bookkeepers in the accounting back office side of my business, if they're going to come and be in that office, they are going to be tested. And I want to know exactly what they know and what they don't know. And I'm okay with teaching, but I am not okay if you lie. You lie, you are out immediately. I don't care. I need authenticity. I need trust. I need loyalty. And the first one is authenticity. If you can't be authentic with me and tell me your truth, then I'm not going to spend the time training you.
You know, what's interesting about that is when I got my job at Cisco, the global tech company, I told them straight up, I said, are we going to be using PowerPoints for presentations? They said, yes. And I said, I can use PowerPoint pretty comfortably, but I am terrible at creating slides. I'm great with creating words and text and verbiage and writing. But when it comes to visuals, that's not a strength of mine. I had to tell them straight up. They said, no worries. We've got people that can help us do that. I also told them how often, or asked them actually, how often would you use Excel in this role? Because I'm not great at Excel either. I've taken classes, I've tried to get better at, and it just doesn't stick. I can use it. I can create very simple spreadsheets, but I'm not good at the calculation piece. And they said, don't worry about it. It's not a big part of the role. So I was super transparent about that as a candidate, and I ended up getting that job.
And I think that's where people think, oh, if I'm super transparent, they're not gonna hire me. And the truth is like that being honest and about what you can really do and what you're going to excel at and what you can't is going to save so much time because then the person that's working with you doesn't have to figure out what you really know and what you don't know and you can start on the right foot the first time around versus going in circles going, I thought they knew how to use Excel.
Yeah, right. So, on that note, so business owners, leaders, be very clear with what is required for a role, including platforms, software, apps, applications that they're going to be needing to use in their day to day. And if anybody watches this and you're actually interviewing for a job, it's helpful to be fully transparent with them about where you're at, like, such as if there's a platform that they need you to know how to use. If you've used it, but you don't feel like you're an expert at it, but you're a quick learner, if you tell them that and be transparent with them, they'll probably appreciate that. But
Yeah.
Grace, so how would you like to wrap up?
Oh, I was going to say, like, here's another tip that I would give to on the
Okay.
business owner side. If you're interviewing and you don't decide to go with that employee, that potential employee, do the best thing and just send them an email and say thank you for the time that it took for you to send in your stuff. And I'm sorry you're not going to go any further with our company, but if we change our mind, we'll come back to you. So that you can leave the door open because you never know. You might go through a list of people and you go, hey, that person, they were good. And why did we stop? And you might actually go back and hire somebody because I've done that. I ended up hiring one of my best hires and I had originally not go forward with that person. But it means even more to those that you are saying no to. It gives them a chance to close that loop and go on to their next job potential and not get stuck in, why didn't they call me? Why didn't I think it's still possible? Like, don't leave people, don't ghost people. That's just rude.
Well, and yeah, that's probably a whole other
That's
episode.
another episode. And I mean, that's the thing. We're going to be talking about this subject for a hot minute because it's so rich in so many different things. And so we only touched lightly on a few talking points today, but we are going to come back and we've got more delicious, incredibly juicy information about hiring and the pitfalls and then the wins that you can have when you do it right. So please stay tuned and come back and see our next episode on My Up Cup.
Yes. And we have a solution too for them.
We do, and we'll talk about that more.
Okay, so we're just planting the seed. We're not going to give it away yet.
We're
All
not
right.
giving it away yet, but we're
Sounds
planting the seed.
good. All right, creating intrigue. I love it. All right, thanks everyone for listening today, and we'll see you next time.